The language of deceit. Notes and extracts. The pond and the swamp. Breaking the bonds of slavery requires the removal of chains that are both tangible and abstract. It means ensuring that the distant is no longer dominant over the relevant. It means being able to focus on what is pertinent, on what is real and immediate. It means being educated on the factors affecting our acts and actions. It means understanding the quest for power, authority, and eventually control over the human ego. It means knowing more than just the what. It means finding the relevance of why, and beyond that, how. Just as the why is always because, the how is always through finance. Retaining wealth is retaining control. Those who seek independence reject most examples of dependence. The pursuit of happiness requires teamwork, but the pursuit also of your own dreams. If we are forever working to generate wealth for others, then we will have little time for our own dreams and progress. We will be little more than slaves. It seems futile to work for the man, just to pay the man. Although there are many human actions that run counter to logic and sense, there are some actions that will always justify themselves. To have a useful purpose requires that we do things for the right reasons, that we seek liberation through contemplation rather than through denial or deception. The true wealth of nations lies in the expedition of freedom and liberties. It lies in the pursuit of human endeavours that are, in their quest, self-evident. It seems that the senseless may be just as important as the sense-filled. That which ties our hands also binds our minds. So where there is a will, there is a way. And where the will is broken and the human spirit is crushed, there will never be a path forward. The darkness is vanquished only by the light. Our story continues. The colonies in America were short of precious metal coins, so they issued their own money, called colonial script. This concept was much disliked by the bankers, as they could not control these debt-free papers. In 1764, the British Parliament passed the Currency Act. It ordered all Americans to pay their taxes in gold or silver coins. After this act, and as a direct result of it, a depression set in. creating huge unemployment. The American people petitioned the British government for redress of the imbalances created by the new monetary policy. Their pleas went unheard, and this sparked physical conflicts that ended with the movement known today as the American Revolution. This is, perhaps without a doubt, one of the most misunderstood events in human history. Physical freedom and economic freedom are two sides of the same coin. Economic slavery and mental slavery are also two sides of the same coin. Rather simply, this can be defined as more leads to more and less leads to less. The European bankers never gave up their quest for control of such a profitable, expanding tax base. The king rarely seeks to bequeath his throne. In 1781, the Bank of North America was created. It was a privately owned central bank that loaned money at interest through the government to the people. This caused inflation, and prices rose by 72%. In 1787, after much political struggle, the US Constitution was written. It actually permitted the federal government to borrow money, and it remained silent on the federal role in printing paper money, known in the language of the day as emitting bills of credit. It could be argued that this one simple defect in the Constitution is at the root of all economic problems today. Those in the know knew what they were doing. The first Bank of the United States opened in 1791 and was a privately owned bank, run by Americans but on behalf of European partners. After 20 years, the bankers asked for the renewal of their charter. At first, the government declined. This led to a war, because children who don't get what they want often throw a fit. Thomas Jefferson was President of the United States at that time, and he was fighting against the restoration of a privately owned banking and financial system. He was fighting for the right of the people to live outside of the debt-based paradigm. He argued that only the Congress should have the right to issue money with no interest. But the power of persuasion was not as influential as the power of the purse. To the detriment of the people, Congress renewed the bank charter in spite of Jefferson's animated protests. Following his election in 1829, Andrew Jackson killed the banks, for a while at least. Perhaps he should have double-tapped them. He was a big opponent of the privately owned banking system. He was elected by an increasingly fed-up and well-read and well-informed citizenry. With the backing of the people, he vetoed the renewed charter of the private banks. This action was met with aggressive resistance from bankers and consequently led to an artificial induced depression. Jackson dealt with this situation head-on by paying off the debt of the United States. This was nothing short of a miracle. This created not only a good economy, but also an economy for good. As an aside, and on a personal note, we don't have the space to study everything here today. But if you really want to understand the true nature of the American struggle, which has always been humanity's struggle, then you need not only to study the life of the presidents of the United States, but also their death and the close calls in between. There is nothing more vital than to understand that the fate of an entire nation may depend on the life of one man. Dead men tell no tales and usually offer less solutions. So Jackson got the United States out of debt, and 25 years later, Abraham Lincoln would do even more. He returned the country to government-issued debt-free money. This money was called greenbacks. For financing the Civil War between the South and the North, Lincoln needed to borrow money from the banks. His request was declined. So he decided to issue government money, just like in colonial times. He simply stated, the government should create, issue and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of the consumer. The banks were most displeased. The American Civil War was always about slavery, but just not the kind that they write about in the classical school curriculum history books. After the assassination of President Lincoln in 1865, the banks began to quickly reassert their control over America's money supply. Within 20 years, 84% of money was withdrawn from circulation. This was the cause of another deep recession and all of the social calamities that ride along with it. It was an open secret that the Bank of England wanted America's money under their control. In 1873, the Congress passed the Coinage Act, and the minting of silver dollars abruptly stopped. Demonetizing silver made money even more scarce. It put the bankers, who were the primary holders of gold, in even greater control of America. The tide had turned again. In 1880, James Garfield, another larger-than-life president of the United States, this time elected on the campaign of sound monetary policy, took on the bankers once again. He understood the money business very well. As he put it, whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled, one way or another, by a few powerful men at the top, You will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate. James Garfield was assassinated 1 year later. Following Garfield's death, a recession emerged and submerged the economy again. Currency was scarce. People were losing their farms and lands. Desperate American people were demanding silver, money, come back. Gold was scarce, and empty properties were everywhere. The stage was now set for the final moves of the game to be played out, almost as if no other possibility ever existed. The Federal Reserve Act was chartered by Congress in 1913. The Reserve is a private bank owned by private stockholders. The Congress gave the monopoly and the right to issue American money to a foreign cartel that would suck the life out of America and bleed the economy dry. There was nothing federal about the Federal Reserve, and there were no reserves. You could stick a fork in it. America, as it had been, was toast. At least for now. Wars followed, and then more wars, more foreign entanglements, more conflicts. You see, everybody works for somebody, but exactly who that person is may not be clear or apparent until well after the fact. As was so clearly pointed out in The Wizard of Oz, the streets that are paved with gold only lead you to discover that there is always a man behind the curtain. The Language of Deceit. Notes and extracts.